The Caribbean, a region synonymous with tranquility, tourism, and trade. Its blue waters are the lifeblood for nations built on connection and commerce. At dawn, Miami wakes to ships on the horizon, a reminder that Caribbean trade never sleeps. Across the Gulf of Paria, cranes rise over skylines where commerce meets contested waters. Streets open for business as shopkeepers lift shutters, economies breathing with the tide. But just over the horizon, a sustained crisis threatens to ignite a fire that could consume these calm waters. Hospitals strain under shortages, corridors dim and equipment idle. A crisis echoing beyond borders. In Venezuela, a nation rich in oil and broken by turmoil, the question is no longer if change will come, but how. Parades showcase military power, armored columns and missile brigades projecting resolve. And in Washington, a bellicose rhetoric from the Trump administration has raised a specter not felt in decades, the specter of war. Even the calm Caribbean swell reflects uncertainty when great powers talk of force. We begin with a statement that reverberated across the hemisphere. We have many options for Venezuela, including a possible military option. Headlines, chyrons, and tweets ignite debates that shift markets faster than ships can turn. Podiums deliver firm lines while archives replay warnings, diplomacy threading every phrase. Since 2017, the Trump administration employed maximum pressure. Sanctions, isolation, recognition of a rival government, threaded with explicit mention of force.
The rhetoric is deliberate. It's meant to fracture the military's loyalty to Maduro, to create a psychological edge. But in the Caribbean, where nations live in the shadow of American power, these words aren't abstract. They are contingency plans. From Grenada to Haiti, interventions left marks on policy. Our timeline is a lesson plan and a caution.
We hear the drums. We have heard them before. Our position, through CARICOM, is for peaceful dialogue and non-interference. But when the elephant twitches, the grass feels it first.
Sanctions tightened the Maduro government's access to capital and markets, squeezing oil lifelines, discouraging tankers, and pushing risk premiums higher. As opposition rallies swelled, foreign capitals issued recognitions, and the diplomatic vice turned, each statement shifting expectations on the street and at sea. Behind podiums, planners modeled spillovers, migration surges, shipping disruptions, and regional stability tests, translating politics into operational risk. Redacted memos outlined logistics math, fuel flow assumptions, convoy timing, insurer risk bans, and the thresholds that trigger reroutes.
Signaling potential force can coerce, but it also amplifies chances of miscalculation, most acutely along crowded sea lanes and among fragile states. At sea, vigilance is routine. Watchstanders scan for skiffs, shadows, and sudden course changes that turn routine transits into incident reports. Aviation corridors and maritime choke points convert charts into spreadsheets. Time, distance, and exposure driving every routing decision.
Each presidential mention spikes anxiety from Caracas to Curaçao. Businesses hedge, bookings dip, and cargo quietly reroutes without a shot fired. History threads through the present. Old footage of grey hulls off our coasts surfaces whenever rhetoric grows loud.
Those memories live in policy DNA across the Caribbean, shaping how leaders hear today's drumbeat. Past interventions calibrate today's diplomacy. Small states weigh every statement and vote to avoid becoming staging grounds. Communiques and cables repeat the same lesson. Survival favors precision over bravado. Meanwhile, ports price risk into schedules and renewals, converting geopolitical noise into operational cost. Contracts sit beside satellite feeds, paper clauses backed by pixels in orbit that monitor assets and exposures. And as traffic traces across the basin converge near Venezuela, even slight shifts ripple through routes, premiums, and plans region-wide. The impact is felt first in South Florida, nexus of hemispheric trade and diaspora. Cruise liners sail from Miami, measuring risk by headlines and holiday calendars. Trade collapsed from 2012 towards zero. Charts tell stories families already lived. Bakeries and arepa shops adapt. Flags on the wall, fewer deliveries at dawn.
My business was 80% with Venezuela a decade ago. Now, zero. The sanctions are necessary, but they killed an entire commercial corridor. A war? It would be the final nail. The uncertainty alone froze what was left. At the quay, forklifts sit quiet. Invoices age while pallets gather dust.
Florida's economy adapts, but even diversified markets wobble when shipping insurance and fuel prices spike from regional tension. Security screens slow flows, spreading delays through warehouses and checkout lines.
Energy markets feel tremors through refined product routing and risk premia. Operations dashboards light up with alerts. ETAs slip, routes recalc, phones ring non-stop. War risk tables rise from routine to red zones. Premiums echo through grocery aisles.
Transit times extend. Customers cancel. A headline in Washington becomes a returned cart in Kendall. At the airport, wide bodies load under amber apron lights. Ground crews stage pallets while manifests shuffle. One delayed leg can unwind a week of promises. Freight still moves, but slower and costlier. Every hour on the tarmac echoes in storefronts across Miami.
The deeper existential threat lies south, among small economies with outsized exposure. From Florida, the map pulls south. Trinidad's gas, Curaçao's docks, Jamaica's lanes. Each glowing port node ties itineraries to insurance and incomes to a single tightening strait. Trinidad and Tobago, a petrochemical hub bound to Venezuela by geology, shared fields and cross-border infrastructure. Shared reservoirs tie Trinidad to Venezuelan gas, pipelines and politics braided across a narrow strait.
Trinidad and Tobago shares a maritime border with Venezuela. We have a gas-sharing agreement vital to our petrochemical industry. A conflict would immediately shut that down, destabilizing our entire economy. Curaçao's refinery is idle because of Venezuela. War would make that idleness permanent. When risk spikes, product tanks and loading arms pause, and every hour of shutdown ripples through payrolls. Stacks fall silent against the sea. Idle time turns to rust, and rust becomes closure.
To the north, Jamaica's transshipment and logistics depend on predictable lanes and stable premiums.
We model closures near Venezuelan waters. A week of rerouting can cascade into month-long backlogs. Our flow diagrams show bottlenecks spreading quickly from Venezuelan ports into CARICOM hubs. At the gates, trucks wait, drivers count hours, and schedules unravel.
When the refinery stopped, foot traffic vanished. If war scares off tourists and investors too, how do we survive?
Energy, shipping and retail are threads of one fabric, pulled taut by uncertainty across the basin. Clauses define coverage. Storms of policy decide whether claims endure. Waves hammer cliffs like shocks on balance sheets, repeating until stone yields. And as confidence ebbs, even tourism flinches. Empty loungers under closed umbrellas, the sun overcast by doubt. Tourism is the oxygen of the Caribbean, over 15% of GDP region-wide. Clear water and quiet reefs sell the dream, but demand is fragile. One advisory or headline can flip sentiment and families postpone trips, pushing cancellations across an entire season. Resorts and cruise lines track advisories in real time. When risk rises near Venezuela, itineraries shift, OTAs flag routes, and occupancy models turn from green to amber in hours. Front desks feel it first. Group bookings pause, deposits are deferred, and flexible cancellation policies soften the blow but cannot fill empty rooms. The minute conflict and Caribbean appear in the same headline, our phones stop ringing. It doesn't matter if the fighting is 500 miles away. To a family in Ohio or London, the Caribbean becomes a zone of trouble. Bookings would evaporate overnight. Our reservation curve would fall fast. First discretionary trips, then conferences, then weddings. That drop ripples to taxi drivers, vendors, attraction operators, and supply orders by the next week. Hotels move to skeleton crews, freeze capex, and renegotiate payables. Housekeeping schedules shrink, restaurants cut hours, and small suppliers wait longer to be paid. Any refugee surge would strain services and intensify risk perception. Even if islands remain safe, images of chaos travel faster than corrections, and they damage our brand. Conflict would trigger desperate crossings, overwhelming fragile services on nearby islands.
We already strain in calm periods. In war, search and rescue and detention capacity would be exceeded in days. Triage sites would activate quickly. Medical screening, translation, and transport coordination. That shifts patrol hours and pulls crews from routine maritime safety. Overflow goes to classrooms and community centers. Shared spaces mean crowded lessons, stretched staffing, and higher operating costs for local councils.
Communities are generous, but budgets aren't elastic. Housing, healthcare, schooling, everything gets stretched. Social services would pivot to emergency mode, cash assistance, counselling, shelter management, while NGOs coordinate food and transport. The question is capacity and time.
Perception drives tourism, pressure drives migration. Both converge on balance sheets. The Caribbean Sea is a shipping crossroads. Conflict reroutes cargo, lifts premiums, and slows trade. Watch a single hull cut through open water, and you can see the stakes. Every advisory shifts lanes, stretches ETAs, and raises the cost of moving essentials.
War risk surcharges can multiply overnight. For small import-dependent islands, that translates into pricier food, medicine, and spare parts within weeks. Insurers price geography. Corridors near Venezuela, off the Paria Gulf, through the Aves Ridge, past the ABC Islands, face higher exposure metrics. Even without a shot fired, proximity alone widens rate bands and narrows coverage. Those premiums cascade into shelves. Importers trim orders. Supermarkets face thinner stock. Households meet inflation not from demand but from distance and danger.
China and Russia support Maduro and invest across the region.
An intervention would be viewed as a direct provocation. The Caribbean could become an arena for proxy competition. Geopolitical tension poisons the business climate, scaring off the foreign investment small economies rely on. Boardrooms read risk the same way markets do. They retreat. Procurement, credit, and hiring all tighten. For islands, higher hurdle rates mean projects pause, then perish.
Our offshore financial centers thrive on predictability. War is the ultimate unpredictability. Capital flight would be rapid, and compliance friction would freeze legitimate business. Banks escalate de-risking. Cross-border wires face enhanced checks and longer holds. Liquidity migrates to safer hubs, starving local credit. Yields spike when uncertainty climbs. That raises borrowing costs for governments and firms, crowding out investment and tightening household budgets.
Liquidity dries. Projects pause. Small shocks turn systemic. 3 headline risks: disrupted shipping lanes and higher premiums, capital flight and credit tightening, policy uncertainty that delays investment and hiring. A locked chain on a quiet dock captures the logic of conflict economics. When fear is priced in, motion stops. Prudence now can keep commerce moving later. Start with words. Rhetoric becomes sanctions. Sanctions become maritime signalling. Next, a declared security zone, then a quarantine with boardings. From there, limited strikes, blockade, and, at the extreme, occupation. At every branch, miscalculation can skip rungs. De-escalation windows narrow with each move. Even a quarantine raises insurance, delays cargo, and invites challenge. A naval quarantine around the Gulf of Paria means escorts shadowing tankers, radio hails, and inspections. AIS goes dark, close approaches raise collision risk, and any aggressive turn can be read as hostile. Premiums jump, Prudent masters divert toward Curaçao and Jamaica. The next rung is a show of force or limited strike. Airfields, radar, or coastal batteries, paired with temporary airspace closures and NOTAMs. Shipping lanes constrict. Aviation corridors shift south and west. Countermoves, missile dispersal or militia harassment, raise the odds of escalation.
Hard power is easier to start than stop. Collateral impacts on shipping and neighbours are unavoidable.
Businesses must model contingencies now. Contingencies now. Diversify suppliers and lanes. Hold cash buffers. Harden cyber and comms. Pre-clear staff safety protocols and muster points. Maintain fuel hedges, alternate ports, and playbooks for curfews, blackouts, and telecom cuts.
Shift critical SKUs to multi-origin sourcing. Pre-book freight. Negotiate force majeure language. Ensure receivables. Backup ERP and finance systems offline. Mirror data to the cloud in a different jurisdiction. Pre-stage printed SOPs. Identify secondary 3PLs, alternate airports and feeder loops, and test switchover under clock. Model a 30, 60, and 90-day cash runway under 20 to 40% revenue dips. Draw revolving lines early. Prioritize payroll and core inventory. Renegotiate terms with landlords and utilities. Prepay critical vendors. Secure deposits and cancellation clauses.
Ask carriers about war risk riders, political violence cover, and business interruption tied to port closure. Confirm insurer notice requirements. Pre-fill claims documentation. Train frontline staff on incident logging. Arrange safe staging areas for drivers and crews, and practice communication trees before they're needed.
Preparedness is not pessimism, it is prudence in a tightening strait. Hospitality moves on cycles measured in headlines and holidays, demand surges with confidence and disappears with doubt. Contingency means repositioning fleets, using codeshare shields, flexing crew bases, and keeping itineraries modular by week. Hotels run on quiet logistics, pallets in, waste out, linen cycles tight. Operators dual-source perishables, stage safety stock, and set trigger points for vendor swaps when advisories change. One advisory can redraw weeks of itineraries. Ports near Venezuela are the first to drop, with calls shifted to safer alternatives. Routes pivot toward the Bahamas and western lanes. Shore excursions are rebooked, tender ports swapped, and airlift rerouted through stable hubs to preserve guest confidence. Marketing pivots to safety, flexibility, and value, because fear resists discounts. Small businesses absorb the first shocks in every downturn. Fuel and insurance jump as bookings fall. Cash buffers decide who survives the season. Micro operators feel it on the ground. Quiet markets, fewer walk-ins, tighter payrolls. They trim hours, avoid layoffs if possible, and push direct channels to keep margin. Triage is practical. Protect payroll, renegotiate rent, defer capex, shift to variable costs, shorten booking windows, and offer fully refundable rates to rebuild demand. Own your channels, update guests transparently, and keep cancellation flexible to convert hesitation into holds. Trust returns through proof. Calm scenes, clear policies, duty of care briefings, easy rebooking, and loyalty credits that reward patience. Resilience is built in the lulls between storms. Use the lull to drill. Crisis comms trees, vendor MOUs, surge staffing pools, and mutual aid links with ports and airports. Measure readiness like occupancy, because when risk rises, only practiced plans hold. Natural gas feeds fertilizers, methanol, and plastics. Profit chains tied to Venezuelan molecules that power factories and exports. To blunt supply shocks, firms lock forward contracts, add dual fuel capability, and carry inventory buffers sized to disruption scenarios. We weigh LNG spot versus pipeline and imported methanol, scoring price volatility, lead time, sanctions exposure, and transport risk before committing. At the terminal, redundancy matters. Pre-inspected seals, spare hoses and loading arms, and practiced shutdown drills keep cargo moving safely. Logistics absorbs risk with visibility and options, alternate routes, flexible windows and honest ETAs. We pre-book lift with multiple carriers, shift to smaller feeders when needed, and stage safety stock inland away from choke points. Manufacturing continuity means dual suppliers, batch resizing to stretch inputs, QA holds for rework, and using maintenance windows to protect uptime. We diversify ports by berth depth, crane count, and risk score, pre-identifying surge terminals if Venezuelan lanes tighten. Regional pooling, shared warehouses, consolidated buys, and pooled insurance gives SMEs leverage and cushions unit costs. Resilience is redundancy by design, dual carriers, mirrored data, secondary gateways, and daylight transits when tensions rise. Dashboards track dwell time, SLA adherence, and war risk alerts. Daily stand-ups align ops, finance, and compliance on go-no-go decisions. We front-load berths, tighten curfews, and sequence priority cargo first, small schedule shifts that prevent big losses. Compliance readiness matters. Pre-cleared docs, entity screening, end-use certificates, and brokers briefed on evolving sanctions lists. Efficiency lowers exposure. Energy audits, backup power, and fuel switch plans keep lines running when geopolitics spike prices. Coordination can blunt shocks and signal stability. We synchronize advisories, pool procurement, and present a unified front to insurers and lenders. Collective tenders unlock volume discounts that stabilize prices and secure supply. Maritime domain awareness and search and rescue protocols are harmonized to handle potential refugee surges. Financing contingencies include emergency credit lines and war risk guarantees. Public-private task forces meet routinely to align SMEs and multinationals on operations and messaging. We lobby for targeted relief, expedited customs for essentials, and clear communications to tourists. Toolkits standardize traveller FAQs, port status pages, and refund policies across the region. Safety nets, cash transfers and payroll support keep temporary shocks from becoming permanent closures. Crisis briefings with interpreters, consistent facts, and clear timelines reduce rumour and reassure markets. Community forums sustain trust. Officials listen, clarify, and update in plain language. Unity and transparency lower fear premiums. Calm coordination signals resilience and buys time for diplomacy to work. Trinidad. Energy heavy, trade exposed. Resin prices swing with geopolitics. We lock 90-day supply and carry extra safety stock. Hedge ladders stagger purchases across quarters. Caps, collars, and futures to smooth shocks and protect margins. Onshore, fishers and small shops feel it first. Diesel, ice, and parts rise before sales do. ABC Islands sit nearest to Venezuelan shores. Hotels and ports cross-train teams to flex across departments during downturns. Import dips empty shelves. Markets trim SKUs, extend reorder cycles, and renegotiate terms. Operations escalate to level 2, coordinate with coastguards, and add AIS geofences near Venezuelan waters. Jamaica leverages transshipment. Timing is money. Data beats panic. Push carrier ETA truth to customers daily. Bahamas. Finance relies on calm seas of regulation and reputation. Enhanced due diligence on LATAM flows. Expect longer clears. Set expectations early. Across islands, livelihoods hinge on steady ports. Dockworkers, clerks, chefs, drivers keeping daily life moving. Different islands, same equation. Balancing risk and livelihood. Behind charts are lives. At the market, vendors stack fruit with practiced grace, greet neighbours by name, and quietly adjust prices when fuel and freight creep up. A morning sale pays for lunch, school shoes, and rent. Resilience counted in small coins and steady smiles. At first light, a lone figure watches the tide. Between the hush of waves and gulls, worry and hope live side by side. Tomorrow's plan depends on today's news, on whether ferries run, shelves fill, and work returns. Parents ask about jobs, safety, and food prices. Children absorb the tone, if not the terms. They feel adult worries in quieter rooms. If patrols close grounds, fuel costs climb and catches fall. For fishers and vendors, thin margins become no margins, every mile, every hour, measured twice. For the United States, intervention would be complex, costly, and polarizing. For Caribbean neighbors, it is existential, felt at docks, shops, clinics, and classrooms. We are not bystanders. We live along the routes of commerce and care. Our economies are delicate ecosystems where a shock in Venezuela becomes a shock at our tables. Conflict would send waves through tourism, trade, and trust, washing across savings and plans, apprenticeships and retirements. The cost of war would not stop at borders. It would arrive with the tide. Peace is not an abstraction here. It is the power to open a shop in the morning and to close it with tomorrow still possible. Hands work dough and steel. Bakers, mechanics, artisans holding communities together. Pride runs through craft, but so do costs. One delayed shipment can idle a week. Neighbors share meals and stories, stretch budgets, and pass plates without counting. In hard seasons, hospitality becomes mutual aid, the oldest institution in the islands. Volunteers pack boxes and lists, rice, batteries, soap, formula. Preparedness is love made practical, one parcel at a time, ready before the storm. The sea keeps its counsel beneath reddened clouds. It reminds us that choices made far away wash ashore here, quietly at first, then all at once. Dignity demands stability. Safe routes, fair prices, open schools. Our future depends on de-escalation and dialogue, on keeping trade lanes open and families whole. The Gulf of Fire, may it remain a metaphor. For the sake of millions, let the drums of war fall silent and let the sounds of commerce and community prevail. Contracts are stress-tested by war clauses, force majeure and sanctions controls. Language that decides who carries risk when politics roils the sea. Update boilerplates now. Define port closure triggers, war risk surcharges, diverted route costs, and documentary proofs required for claims. Build a compliance playbook, automated checks, escalation paths, dual approvals, and time-stamped audit trails that stand up to regulators and insurers. Screen vessels and counterparties in real time, OFAC and SDN lists, beneficial ownership, AIS anomalies and dual-use red flags to prevent inadvertent breaches. Insurance translates uncertainty into price. Premiums, deductibles, exclusions, and sublimits move with headlines and proximity to risk. Underwriters price geography, recent incidents, cargo type, and port security. Documented mitigation plans can shave points and widen cover. Clarify your stack: property, business interruption, marine cargo, and political violence, each with triggers, waiting periods, and proof of loss terms. Bundle BI with port closure and civil authority riders, capture board approvals, broker attestations, and contingency SOPs inside the policy file. Execute the paperwork. Endorsements issued, stamps applied, renewal calendars set. Store certificates and COIs where auditors and claims teams can reach them fast. The cheapest preparedness is clarity, no coverage, notice windows, salvage steps, and documentation checklists before any incident occurs. Compliance extends to customers. Refresh KYC, collect sanctions attestations, and communicate delays early, or queues and disputes will multiply. Publish clear public guidance, traveller FAQs, port status pages, and temporary payment relief to reduce rumour-driven cancellations and chargebacks. Stress test cash and reserves for shipping delays, premium spikes, and FX swings. set thresholds for spend freezes and pre-approved contingency draws. Politics shape policy, and policy shapes risk. In Washington, hearings and briefings turn strategy into talking points. Witnesses are sworn, charts unveiled, and every sentence is weighed for deterrence, diplomacy, and domestic optics. The subtext: how to project resolve without igniting a wider fire. Inside the interagency, deterrence is balanced against blowback across the Caribbean basin. Maps behind the podium show corridors and choke points. Officials speak of sanctions, coalitions, and all options, knowing markets, insurers, and shippers pass each word. Policy signals ripple faster than ships can turn. Partisan divides colour the narrative, hawks and doves trading charts and forecasts. The result is a rhetoric cycle that can raise premiums, shift routes, and harden positions before any order is signed. Inside Venezuela, crisis is daily life. Blackouts, queues, and thin shelves define the routine. Families adapt by candlelight, weighing risk, rationing fuel, and watching headlines that may tighten borders or close lifelines overnight. War risk would worsen shortages, accelerate flight, and complicate any peaceful transition. Years of underinvestment show in corroded pumps and leaking valves. Infrastructure fragility makes recovery slower, costlier, and more vulnerable to shocks from sanctions or conflict. Tactical maps trace oil, fuel, and migration routes toward the Caribbean and beyond. Each arrow implies decisions for navies, insurers, and port authorities, lines that could become lifelines or flashpoints. Smuggling networks, armed groups, and porous borders turn spillovers from theory into risk planning. Distant capitals debate, local grids flicker. In both Washington and Caracas, the uncertainty is visible. Press rooms lit bright, apartment windows dim, and people on the ground brace for the next announcement. Two realities linked by tides and trade winds, and by choices made in distant rooms. What can Caribbean businesses do now? Start with a clear playbook. Inventory cash, fuel, and food buffers. Confirm secondary suppliers outside the basin and pre-negotiate lift on alternative lanes. Backup data and contacts offline. Assign a crisis cell with defined thresholds and duties. Keep a template for customer updates, bilingual and calm. Map who you depend on and who depends on you. Practice the plan before you need it. Map suppliers beyond the basin. Negotiate war risk clauses early. Share real-time ETAs with customers every day. Ready. Together. Open the doors with purpose. Brief the team. Call top customers first, then suppliers. Document disruptions and keep receipts, timestamps and photos for insurance. Rotate staff to prevent burnout. Support neighbours. Lend forklifts, cold storage, or bandwidth where you can. Small acts compound into community resilience. Routine becomes reassurance, and reassurance keeps commerce alive. Trade, tourism, and trust. These are the true security guarantees of the Caribbean. Stability is not passive. It is managed every morning by shopkeepers and stevedores, skippers and clerks. It is built by accurate information, fair policies, and quiet competence. When rumours rise, answer with facts. When costs rise, answer with efficiency. When fear rises, answer with empathy. Our region has weathered storms of wind and storms of politics. We endure by acting early, speaking clearly, and standing together. Onward. Choose calm. Your checklist. Protect people first. Guard liquidity. Diversify lanes and fuels. Confirm coverage. Communicate early. Repeat often. Document everything. Partner with competitors when it protects jobs. Keep training. Keep improving. Keep faith with your community. The Caribbean's strength is not measured only in GDP or cargo tonnage. It is measured in how we show up when tides turn, how we keep crews paid, keep shelves stocked, and keep guests, patients, and families safe. It is measured in port captains who reroute at dusk and bakers who rise at 4, in accountants who stretch days to meet payroll, and teachers who steady anxious classrooms, in coastguards who pull strangers from rough water, and volunteers who sort boxes until midnight. We cannot mute the winds beyond our shores, but we can trim our sails with skill. We can reduce exposure without reducing ambition. We can insist on diplomacy while preparing for disruption. If rhetoric heats, we cool our processes. If costs spike, we widen options. If headlines shout, we speak plainly to those we serve. Choosing stability is choosing each other. Business owners, workers, officials, and visitors, linked by ferries, flights, and shared horizons. Let the sea be busy with commerce, not conflict. Let piers echo with work, not worry. May wisdom prevail in distant rooms, and may our islands continue to trade, teach, heal, and welcome. The Gulf of Fire will remain a warning, not a fate, if we act with prudence and solidarity, today and every day that follows.